And I'd like to welcome you to the House, Minister, and welcome your stated commitment to reform in this area, which Senator McDougall has also noted. And just to commend Senator McDougall and his colleagues for bringing forward this important bill, and indeed to note Senator McDougall's most interesting account of some of the context and background to Seanad reform. And I spoke on this last week when we were debating Senator Malcolm Byrne's bill, and I spoke of a sense of déjà vu, which I think many of us feel when we come to this topic. But I think it's useful to remind ourselves of the hugely significant constitutional role played by the Seanad, that it's important that we continue as senators to assert that role, which is in fact the reason why a number of us, including myself and the Labour senators and indeed Senator McDougall, took a case before the High Court earlier this year to assert the role of the Seanad and to seek clarification on the constitutional on a constitutional issue around the status of a Seanad post-election. So without going back over that, that was very important, and I think other colleagues have spoken about the contribution that the Seanad and senators have made in ensuring robust levels of scrutiny of legislation and bringing forward legislation. I must say, in my own time as a senator, I've had quite a number of private members' bills accepted and that have become law on issues as diverse as legalisation of humanist weddings, recognition of freelance workers for collective bargaining purposes, and indeed the prohibition of female genital mutilation. So the Seanad can and does play a really important role in the development and the scrutiny of legislation. And indeed, this current Seanad has one particular aspect as well of difference to the Dáil, which is that we have a far better gender balance, with 40% of our senators now women, a record high and really welcome, when the Dáil continues to languish behind so many European legislatures in terms of the proportion of women, with only 22.5% of our TDs being women, even with gender quota legislation. So I think it's absolutely right in this sort of debate to assert the importance and the significance of the Seanad. But we do also acknowledge, of course, that reform is long overdue, and indeed in 2013, when the referendum was defeated happily and the proposal to abolish the Seanad was vetoed by the people, this was really a vote for reform, not a vote for the status quo, and I think all of us on opposition and government sides would acknowledge that. And I think, as Senator McDougall did, I would also acknowledge that the Greens in the last election and in the negotiations around the programme for government appear to have pushed for Seanad reform as a priority, and I'm really glad that in last week's debate, I think you said that although the programme for government disappointingly doesn't include an explicit commitment on Seanad reform, that the three composite parties have recognised the need for urgent action, and that action would indeed come in 2021. So in that context, we look at the ground that has been laid and the preparatory steps that have been taken towards that reform. And without going back over all the detail, of course, we're all aware of the Manning report, that very important process chaired by former Senator Maurice Manning. And just to say, I'm also a big admirer of Maurice Manning's, and I think he did an extraordinary work, along with his other colleagues, in bringing on the process of reform and producing a really clear set of proposals in a Seanad bill in 2016. At the time that the report was being prepared, on behalf of the Labour senators, I made a submission to the report, which I spoke about last week, which put forward a series of practical ways in which the Seanad could be reformed to bring about universal suffrage, to bring about expansion of the 6 university seats, the electorate for the 6 university seats, and so on. And I still think those proposals really merit review again, and because I think they really do answer a lot of the concerns about necessitation for the need, I should say, for reform. To make the processes of electing the Seanad more democratic. We are also all aware of the Seanad Reform Implementation Group, so ably chaired by Senator McDougall. I was glad to serve on that for Labour, and again, that broadly endorsed many of the proposals in the Manning report, diverged from it on a number of issues, and we're all aware of the report, which included a draft bill, and Senator McDougall has spoken about that. So this bill effectively builds on the recommendations of those different processes. And I'm very happy to support it on behalf of Labour, because while it differs from the proposals we put forward to the Manning report in some some ways, nonetheless it represents a really practical and effective way to reform the Seanad. And there's some particular merits it has, I think. And just to say briefly, to speak briefly on some of those, the proposal to establish a Seanad Electoral Commission I think is very welcome, that would manage the electoral process and that would deal with some of the undoubted logistical issues that arise from changing and expanding the electorate for the 49 senators that are elected. I think it's also very welcome to see in part 1 the provision that the Minister may appoint different dates for commencement of the provisions to allow therefore for an incremental expansion of the franchise, and that answers one of perhaps the main objections to, or sort of perhaps obstacles to Seanad reform, which is that of cost and logistical difficulty, that if you can set out an incremental process, that really answers that, or at least it addresses that. The processes for the holding of Seanad elections and nomination of candidates are set out in Part 4 and of course follow the constitutional requirements. And there are also provisions, as we know, around filling of casual vacancies, how the Seanad Election Commission is to be set up and how it is to function and so on. Crucially, of course, the bill also does what, or would do what Senator Byrne's bill sought to do, in that it would expand the 6 university seats in the franchise for those to enable graduates of higher education institutions throughout the state to vote. So that's very important. And it's something that, again, I support, and it was in our own Labour proposal in 2015. But I think, if I may say, that this bill, because it's more comprehensive, is a better vehicle within which to bring about that reform. For the very reason that I spoke on last week when we were debating Senator Byrne's bill, which is that his bill would bring about effectively a lopsided Seanad, a very skewed electorate where you have 800,000 voters electing 10% of the 60 senators, and the others still remaining elected by the much smaller electorate that currently applies. So I think it is essential that we would bring forward legislation that creates a comprehensive package of reforms for the 49 elected members, albeit that we would allow within that comprehensive framework, we would enable or provide for incremental bringing about of expansion of the franchise. So I don't think any of us would see it as feasible to do everything all at once, but I think it's important that if we are reforming the university panel to expand the electorate there, that we're doing it in the context of the broader reform proposals from the Manning Report and the implementation group. And that's really the big strength, I think, of this bill as opposed to Senator Byrne's bill. In terms of Labour, as I said, we have always called for the need to establish an electoral commission, so that's hugely important. And our own proposals did have, as I say, some other significant aspects to them that are not included either in this bill or indeed in the implementation group report. One in particular, Minister, I would mention is that we proposed that Seanad and Dáil elections would take place on the same day. Quite a radical proposal, permitted within the terms of the Constitution, but would answer the critique often levelled at us, which is that people who have failed to win a seat in the general then turn around and run for the Seanad. So it was one proposal that didn't find favour in either by the Manning Report or the implementation group, but it's again worth reviewing. So just to finish, to say that the principle of universal suffrage is hugely important. The principle of expansion of the university seats very important. Very disappointing to see the government motion. And I would ask that government senators who may be very reluctant to support that government motion would instead seek to allow this bill to pass second stage, and then we can all work together to ensure it becomes reality.
Thank you.